I'm very happy to have again Iza Romanowska, our first keynote speaker here, because she was a panel discussant together with Michael Rose when we did our forum RESOC some time ago. And so I'm happy that also this collaboration is going on. So I will hand on directly on Iza, that as Frederick already said us, she's our first keynote speaker.
Yeah, so the stage is yours, Iza. I think you should be able to share also.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much for inviting me. And I wish we were in Bochum.
Yeah.
I remember it was great fun coming last time. Remember those times when we could literally sit next to each other in the room? Let's hope those times will come. Can I please just have like a quick wave that you can see my screen as in the presentation?
Yeah. Yes, we see it. Yes.
All right, so I'll jump straight in so that we don't lose any more time.
I will highlight you the last 5 minutes, and you will get the 5 minutes we just took away from you.
Okay. I will also put my timer on. So, because the truth is, my name is Iza Romanowska. I am currently at the Aarhus Institute of Advanced Studies, and I'm an absolute agent-based modeling fanatic. So I could easily sit here and talk to you until 12, completely disregarding that other people may have something to say as well. Because I love ABM so much, I really look forward to the discussion, because whilst loving it, I also know there are issues. I mean, are not issues, there are limitations to every method, and that includes agent-based modeling. But we shouldn't start on a negative note, because if we already kind of beat ourselves about what we cannot do, then we will never actually do anything. So I thought I will start with a very inspirational quote for me coming from Stephen Hawking, who said, I think the 21st century will be the century of complexity. And what he meant by it is that science have solved the easy problems. The easy problems, we know what the answers are. It is not that you can jump into a discipline and within 15 minutes basically solve things that people have been debated for years. We are currently in a moment where those simple methods, simple just thinking about stuff, is not enough. And I believe agent-based modeling is one of those methods that will help us move forward with that. So today in the talk, I will give a bit of a background, a bit of a kind of basic definitions, and what are we even talking about modeling, because there's still a lot of confusion about it, and there's very rarely it is very rarely part of curriculum. So people jump into modeling without actually understanding what part of science it is and why I were doing it. I will then talk specifically about ABM. And just to quiz any panic now, I will not talk about 3 case studies, because that would really take us until 12. I will focus on a case study that we use to talk about product preference that is more related to resources. And if you have any questions about some other case studies, I am happy to answer them later. All right, so let's jump straight in. This is a bit of an exercise that I always give every single presentation, because it really makes you realize that how little we understand about models. So when you look at this graph, the points, do you think that's a model or do you think that's data? And I bet a lot of you will say, well, that's just data. I'm not going to provide any context. Something has been measured at certain intervals or not, and those are the values. And you know, those are we deal with this kind of things in archaeology a lot. We collect data a lot, but we never present them like that. We never show this kind of graph. What we do is this, and this is the same points, but there's a line linking them. And if you think that this line is data, then you're absolutely and utterly wrong, because you have never measured any point on this line other those original data points. The fact that the line connects the point is already an assumption. The fact that those points are somehow related is already a model. And the fact that they are connected in the most straightforward line from one to another is again an assumption and a model. So within, the tiniest of step we do outside of literally listing the data, we are already modeling. And that also applies to archaeology. We can say things like the earliest known trace of modern humans in Europe is at the site of Bachakira that is dated to 45,000 years ago. Or 70% of European countries were governed by authoritarian regimes prior to the Second World War. Or Tacitus wrote that these two tribes differed in their religion, which led to a conflict. All of those things are basically type of data. They're either archaeological locations with the dates, or certain percentages, etc., or even like written sources. But we rarely say that. We say modern humans came to Europe through the Balkans. That's based on the fact that Bachakira is the first site we know. Or human societies go through cycles of democracy and authoritarian regimes. Again, this is based on that data that I just told you about. But our cultural differences is the most important factor driving conflict. All of those things, all of those summaries, interpretations of data are models. And those models here are expressed in natural language, which means that they're not well defined. What do we mean by modern humans? What do you mean came to Europe through the Balkans? Where do Balkans start? Does it mean that all of the groups came through Balkans or just the first one? Does it mean that other routes were used or not? This is a very, very poorly defined model, but it is still a model. And we do loads of them in archaeology. So they're everywhere, but some of them are better than others. So let's define a model. And a model is simply a version of a real system that is abstracted, that is simplified. And here you have a map of the city I'm currently in, Aarhus. It's a lovely city, and it's a lovely map, Google map, obviously. And it includes elements that are relevant to the questions asked. So if I wanted to say, oh, how do I get to this posh restaurant called St. Paul's Apothek? Then this is a perfect model, right? It shows me exactly the streets. I avoid going through buildings. It shows me what's the quickest way to get there is using that model of the city of Aarhus. It doesn't give me things like the height of the buildings, because that's of no interest to me when I'm walking through the city. In fact, this map, which is basically our tram map, would be a better one because you can get there faster by train. But there can be other maps of Aarhus. This is the geology map of Aarhus, and this is another model of the city of Aarhus that is completely irrelevant to the question I asked. So the first two maps are not denying the reality that there is a geology underneath the city. What they do is they basically only include aspects that are relevant to the questions I asked. So none of those models are better than the other ones. They're just different. But we're going to be talking about something more complicated. We're going to be talking about simulation. And simulation is basically a model that unravels over time in whatever way. So that's a pretty simple. So why do we use it? In some cases, it is impractical or impossible to build the real thing. So you need to create a simulation first. Sometimes it would be immoral to experiment on humans. For example, the economists, as much as I believe they would love to do it, they cannot slap 120% taxes on all of us and then see what happens. And sometimes the system is just too small, too big, too far away, think galaxies, molecules, things that we just cannot directly observe with ease. So in general, we use simulation and modeling when we have no actual access to the real system, and we have to use something instead of experiments on it. And when you think about what is it that we truly do not have access to in any way, then there is a resounding answer that interests us all, and it's the past. So we will never be able to run any experiments on it. We'll never be able to go and observe it directly. There is no other way than using methods that deal with systems that we don't have access to. And simulation is a primary tool for that. In fact, it is primary tool in science as a whole. You can divide the kind of scientific endeavor into those three legs of the science tool. The theory, ideas we have about the world, the observation, so the data we collect from the world to understand it better, and the modeling that links the two. And currently, this is how archaeology looks like. We've been amazing, balancing on the two legs, which is the theory and the data, trying to basically say, well, data says this, data says that, and then we abstract it into some kind of interpretations. But this is not a solid place to be. So I propose we do this using any modeling methods we can, but agent-based modeling in particular. All right. So why do we want to do it? And here I wanted to bring this quote from Peter Dodds, who said, "There's no love in a carbon atom, no hurricane in a water molecule, no financial collapse in a dollar bill. Similarly, there is no past in a piece of pot, and there is no understanding of human evolution in one hand axe." What is happening here is that we collect this data and then we summarize it, and we go on and have those kind of patterns in data. So here you have change over time in distribution of pottery types. But what does it tell us about the past? I mean, nobody cares that there was more amphoras in one period over another. What we do care is, what does it mean about the society that created and used those amphoras? And for that, we should use methods such as agent-based modeling. So I believe most of you will probably have heard of agent-based modeling. So you know that it's a technique that involves having agents, and they have attributes such as, I don't know, age or energy or whatever else, and they live in this kind of little world of their own when they can interact with each other and with their environment. It is basically a model, a very good model of how, for example, humans behave. And very often it's contrasted with equation-based models, which are the kind of top-down type of models and simulations, in which you construct an equation that describes the same system, but using more general terms. So for example, instead of having age, you would have a rate of, age and say energy and reproduction systems. You would have rates of, population growth. So agent-based is kind of a bottom-up technique, where the interactions cause population level patterns. The equation-based models are the top-down technique, where you describe the system using mathematical notation. And there are three superpowers of ABM that I will argue nothing else has, and that we really can crack on as like those cool things that it provides us. And the first one is my favorite, is that the model definition is super duper intuitive. I mean, when you create an equation, most of archaeologists just glance over or just drop asleep immediately, or turn around and run. Because what is a rate of something? What is a rate of pottery replacement? I mean, it takes so much effort to figure it all out. And this is kind of argument from ignorance, but there you go. That's the reality of it. Agent-based models are very easy to define because they're intuitive. It's very easy to understand the dynamics. You have agents and they age, they create families, they have babies, etc. All of those entities are very familiar to us. The rules of behaviors are what we think about the world, and they're expressed in a way that we can immediately understand, both us and people that are not necessarily modelers. Second, ABM enables us to study what we call emergent phenomena. So things that are a result of interactions between elements of a system that are not intuitive in itself. Things may interact, and you would not guess what the population level pattern will be out of those interactions. And they also allowed us to weaken some of the standard assumptions, some of the standard axioms. So for example, if you use equation-based models, very often you would be assuming full rationality or global knowledge of the agents, a perfect mixed population, things that very often work perfectly fine, and there's no problem with that, but sometimes they don't. And also you do get a lot of slack for it. But also ABM allows us to model things like communication between agents, adaptation, change of behavior as a response to what is happening, and evolution. So change in the system over time as it happens. It is super good for that. And it has something that we archaeologists and pretty much anyone in humanities holds dear, which is the individual agency. the fact that we're dealing with heterogeneous populations. So every agent can be different. Every agent can be unique. They don't have to be, but they can. And every agent finds itself in some kind of very specific local circumstances. And that is something that I'm telling you does not matter for the vast majority of models. But we are so attached to this exceptionalism of human beings that we find it very difficult to say that this doesn't matter. So Agent Maze kind of allows you to do it, even when there's not really much need for it. So how does it work in practice? I'll give you one of the fun case studies I worked on over the pandemic. And this one is actually already published. So I will be talking about the product preference in the Roman East. And this is work by Simon Carignan and from his PhD with collaboration with Tom Brugmans. So we started from this general pattern of pottery distribution in the Eastern Mediterranean during the Roman times. And you can see dots on the maps, those are sites, and sites, archaeological sites, you find pottery on it. We focus on 5 types of pottery, which is the Eastern sigillata pottery, A, B, C, D, and Italian one. Very original names, well done archaeologist. So in the graph, you basically see the distribution of that pottery over time. You see that the red one, which is Eastern sigillata A, has been dominant for most of the time. And the other types kind of appeared, but they weren't as common. And however, as some of them starting to kind of grow, the Eastern sigillata A started to decline. So this is the general pattern. But again, who cares? Who cares that Eastern sigillata A was the most dominant type? It doesn't tell us anything interesting about humans. What we were interested in is the product preference. So we created an agent-based model where you have little agents who are traders, and each of them have certain strategies. Strategy in buying and selling pottery. It could be any product, to be honest. It's an abstract enough model. And some of those strategies are better than others. So what we were interested is this combination between economic interactions, but also cultural interactions. Cultural interactions meaning learning from other traders. So at each time step, the traders, they exchange with other traders based on a specific strategy they have, and then they score for success, how well it panned out for them. And they can learn and update their strategy. So you see this point of agent-based modeling here, that the agents can actually change what they're doing during the course of the simulation. So the 3 types of kind of learn update mechanism for the strategy that we use, where we wanted to combine the kind of social learning with economic transactions, were innovation. So adapt your strategy independently, and that would be done in a random way. Basically, just change things and see whether it sticks. Learn from the best. So look around your network of agents and basically copy the strategy of the best scoring agent, and then learn at random. Just pick up any other agent and see whether using their strategy would be better than your strategy. And then we run this model million times because we had a supercomputer. Like, to be honest, I think we ran it about 800,000 times. And we used what is called ABC, approximate Bayesian computation, in order to test under what conditions this simulation will match the pattern that I showed you at the beginning, with one type of pottery dominating, but then losing its dominance over the market compared to other models. Basically what you need to see in this graph, let's not explain it entirely, is whatever has the highest kind of bar is the one that fits the database best. So we had those three scenarios we tested: the success bias, so copy from the best; the independent, which is just tinker with your own strategies; and unbiased, which is copy from anyone. And you can see that in all circumstances, I mean, those are the kind of steps of the Bayesian process. So the step 13 is the most important. Basically, the independent strategy. So change things at random on your own without learning from anyone explains the data best, which was a shock to us. We did not expect that result at all. We were absolutely sure it will be the success bias, but there you go, simulation surprises. And so that's the first result, but there's also other things you can get out of simulations like that. So you see the graphs of kind of density. This is all Bayesian density stuff, where you see the priors, which is just the outline, and the kind of values for the independent learning. And it turns out that in order for the independent strategy to work, you know, the interactions should happen at a regular interval, and you know, you can kind of zoom in at how often people would have to meet for it to work. But also interestingly, the rate of innovation just should not be too high. If it is too high, then you know, the fit to the data really isn't that great. So so that was an interesting thing that that gave us a bit of a better understanding, because it kind of indicates that traders in the Roman East, they probably didn't have that much of information passing between them. So the integration of this market wasn't as high as we assumed, and that is quite a result based on just bits of pods scattered over sites. We obviously look forward to other models that perhaps will shed more light on it. We take into account that maybe pottery is just not a good proxy, especially kind of luxury pottery such as Eastern Sigillata. Maybe it's not a good proxy of all trading interactions, but at least it gives us a model that can be tested and says, well, under those circumstances, this is the most likely scenario. So if you would like to learn some more, oh, sorry, if you would like to learn some more, the paper is out. You can feel free to read it. There's tons and tons technical description that I personally fell asleep on. So good luck, friends. But if anyone wants to take the model and destroy it, that's also, the code is available. The description of the code is available. And we look forward to somebody saying this is actually incorrect result because we were very disappointed with it. And so let's sum it up. We all model, all of us, archaeologists, economists, non-archaeologists, everyone, we do loads and loads of modeling. But some models are better than others. And they are better than others because you can test them, not because they are right. Our model of trading interaction in East Mediterranean may be incorrect. There is no evidence that if you put something in a computer, then this is more likely to be the right model of a phenomenon. But it always has the great value that it can be tested and it can be expanded and it can be checked by other people and basically, you know, rejected if it's incorrect. So there is scope for improvement. And for complex systems, of which human societies is undoubtedly one, simulation is the only salvation. And I take those words from Andrew Kostopoulos. There are no other ways. You won't figure it out in your head, no matter how smart or how you are or how much you read. You have to use robust computational frameworks to figure out things about complex systems. And we can just as well use ABM because ABM speaks the same language as we do. And in most cases, it's probably unnecessary, but we can just as well go with it because the alternative is just not fit for our discipline. So I believe you're all convinced now and you want to start on. So the first port of call will be the great textbook that is coming up this spring. Despite the pandemic, the Santa Fe Institute Press will release a fantastic agent-based modeling for archaeologists textbook written by yours truly, together with Colin Wren and Stephanie Crabtree. And if you cannot wait, there's a series of papers we've done for advances in archaeological practice that talk about those topics and kind of give the general introduction tutorials about it. And there's loads of resources online, some of which I marked here. So if you have any questions and you want to start on it, you really can. And I hope that this will inspire you to do so. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isa, for this very nice and wonderful keynote lecture. So I'm one of those who were already convinced by her. So I'm a testimonial and I'm looking forward, of course, to read your book. And I know already your articles. Okay, enough for advertising you. But yes, I'm very happy about starting this discussion now about what you already said in your presentation. And I don't know if there is somebody who wants to make a direct question, because then we have now time for just one direct question or remark, and we will discuss more about the entire session at the end. So please, if I don't know, in the chat I don't see any, but if somebody wants to ask something, please do it now. Otherwise, I will just, I have a remark, which is something that is very important for archaeologists, I guess. So the way in which we are choosing our proxies, because you pointed out this Lux reports or whatever, that is something that, of course, we archaeologists love very much because it's shiny and it's nice and we have a lot. But then, of course, maybe there is a sort of bias that we also have to test. And that is something that makes me think a lot about the way in which we choose proxy for something. But there is Matteo Cantisani, and he has a question. Please, Matteo. Matteo?
Hello, good morning.
Okay. Good morning.
Thank you for your presentation. A very fast question. Because you talk about human agency, so I was wondering if this model may consider also the incorporation of material agency to an extent. So,
what do you mean by material agency?
Well, yes, I mean, if it can be incorporated also the discourse about more kind of distributed agency. So with not the focus on humans, but also focus on, you know, I mean, so the material, so inanimate things or the environment, broadly speaking.
So agent-based modeling, and it's not very special to agent-based modeling. In general, simulation and modeling techniques, it's a language. So there is literally nothing you cannot incorporate. There are no limits. You can go as crazy as you want. If you want material agency, absolutely. If you want environment, absolutely. If you want things that, you know, we would not normally do in mathematical frameworks, such as, I don't know, senses or emotions, you can absolutely do that. If you have a way of operationalizing your ideas, what does it mean in practice? How would people behave because of X? How would environment change because of Y? You can do everything. There's like even stuff that doesn't make any sense, even stuff that is kind of science fiction. You can, you know, this is your world. You can do anything. You can basically say, oh, and people will always be super cooperative, even though we know they're not. What would happen then? You can say, oh, what if I don't know, environment had agency and tried to kill us all? You can do anything you want. Any crazy idea you have, you can put it in, but there has to be a method of operationalizing it. So there has to be some kind of, you know, what kind of behavior, what kind of rule will kind of make it, will kind of, you know, represent what your ideas. And just very quickly commenting on Maya's proxy question. Yes, the proxy question is a great question. That's not a question for ABM, that's a question for archaeology. You know, whether, whichever method you use, even if you just kind of make those generalized statements, you know, whether your proxy is the right one, we don't know. My personal strategy is try them all, see what works, argue to death over it, and kind of carry on with the scholarship of it. So yes, but you know, one of the things that that modeling and simulation teaches you is not to be too sure about what you believe in. And that is a useful lesson to have. So yes, we can all have our beliefs, but let's not cling to them too much, because we don't know. We weren't there during the Roman times. And if we were, we have several economists here. It's not that they can tell us how economy works and it's in front of them. So, you know.
Yeah, very true. I just want to make a very short comment. I was very happy that you said, well, it's a language. We should understand it as a language. And whatever we can express in natural language, in the language we normally use, can also be somehow expressed in a mathematical model or in a computer model. There might be different ways to do that, right? And we may have some misunderstandings, but that's the problem of the natural language, because it's often not precise. And when we want to implement it in computer code, then we are forced to be precise, right? And that's one of the big advantages, that it really forces us to narrow down what we mean and to be very, very specific, because otherwise the computer won't work. But in the end, it's just a language. So this relates to the question of Matteo, right? So always these questions, can you model this and that? Yes, we can. If we can talk about it, we somehow can model it.
It just takes time.
Yeah,
of course, yes.
As well.
I'm not saying that it's easy, right? I'm not saying that it's easy, but I say that it's possible.
Yeah.